My husband didn't just want a divorce. He wanted to see me beg. He sat across from me in a fake disguise, offering me $10 million to betray himself. He thought he was playing a game with his clueless wife. What he didn't know. I wasn't his wife anymore. I was his boss. Before we reveal how Sienna turned the tables and left a billionaire begging on the streets, do me a huge favor. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Why? Because 90% of you watching aren't subscribed, and you do not want to miss the shocking ending of this series. Plus, it helps us bring these insane stories to life. Don't. Alright, let's get into the mind-blowing fall of Dominic Thorne. Dominic Thorne stared at his reflection in the penthouse mirror. The glass was flawless, imported from Italy, reinforced, treated to never fog no matter how high the humidity climbed above Manhattan. It reflected him the way the world always did, sharply, cleanly, without distortion. 33. Billionaire. Untouchable. Those words weren't vanity, they were math. His suit jacket lay draped over the back of a leather chair, charcoal wool tailored so perfectly, it looked poured onto him rather than sewn. The cuffs of his white shirt hugged his wrists, just enough to show a sliver of a platinum watch, custom, of course. He didn't bother checking the time. Time bent for men like him. Dominic lifted his chin slightly, studying the faint scar near his jawline. A souvenir from a boxing match in Zurich more than a decade ago. The other man had broken his nose. Dominic had bought the gym. He reached up and adjusted his cufflinks. Onyx discs engraved with the Thorne crest, then smoothed the front of his shirt. Not because it wrinkled, but because control was a habit. You practiced it even when unnecessary. Especially when unnecessary. Behind him, reflected faintly in the mirror's depth, Sienna stood at the marble island. She was folding laundry. In a kitchen larger than most people's apartments. A slab of Carrara marble stretched between two gold-veined columns. Above it hung 3 pendant lights, shaped like teardrops, each one probably costing more than the sweaters she insisted on buying from clearance racks. Her hands moved carefully, methodically. A white shirt. His, folded into a neat square. Then another. Her sweater sleeves were pushed up to her elbows, revealing brown skin warm against the cold stone. The fabric soft and slightly worn at the cuffs. The sweater itself was beige. Plain. The kind of thing that came bundled in 3s at discount stores. It did not belong here. Neither did she. That was what irritated him most. Not that she was quiet. Not that she was gentle. But that she behaved as if the penthouse were temporary. As if she were a guest. As if she might vanish tomorrow and didn't want to leave fingerprints. Dominic's jaw tightened. Most women who married him tried to brand themselves onto every surface of his life within weeks. They redecorated, reorganized, requested private chefs and new cars and assistants and spa memberships in Monaco. Sienna had asked where the nearest laundromat was. He'd stared at her for 10 full seconds before answering. Now she folded his shirts by hand, even though a staff of 3 rotated through the penthouse daily. He'd told them to stop touching her things. He hadn't been sure why. She stacked the folded clothes into a neat pile, then reached for a pair of socks. Matched them carefully before rolling them together. Like money wasn't endless. Like time mattered. Like she'd learned to be precise because waste had once hurt. Dominic turned slightly so he could see her more clearly in the mirror. Her hair was pulled into a loose knot at the nape of her neck, strands slipping free. No makeup except a touch of gloss. No jewelry beyond the thin gold chain he'd given her on their wedding night. A necklace she never took off, even though he'd offered to replace it with something heavier. Something louder. Something worthy. She kept her eyes on the clothes. Didn't glance at him. Didn't ask where he was going. Didn't comment on the suit. That silence crawled under his skin. She never wanted anything. No diamonds. He'd once slid a velvet box across a restaurant table in Paris, a casual gesture. The way other men passed bread. Inside had been a pair of emerald earrings, rare stones, cut in a private workshop in Geneva. She'd stared at them for a long moment, then closed the box. "They're beautiful," she'd said gently. "But I don't think I'd wear them." Dominic had blinked. "Why not?" "They feel heavy." He'd laughed, assuming it was a joke. She hadn't joined him. No yachts. He owned 3. One anchored in Monaco, one drifting between Greek islands, one permanently staffed in the Caribbean. "Come with me next weekend," he'd told her once, already picturing how she'd look against the railing, wind in her hair, photographers desperate for a shot. "I have a library book due," she'd replied. He'd thought she was teasing. She hadn't been. No power. That was the strangest part. She didn't attend galas unless he insisted. Didn't network. Didn't ask about stock prices or hostile takeovers. When reporters ambushed them, she smiled politely and stepped half a pace behind him, as if shrinking would make her invisible. Boring, he thought. The word echoed in his skull without guilt. Boring was unforgivable. In his world, boredom was weakness. Worse, dangerous. He turned fully now, leaning one shoulder against the mirror's edge, arms crossing over his chest. Men like Dominic trusted ambition. You could price ambition. You could tempt it, threaten it, leverage it. Ambition left fingerprints. It wrote emails, signed contracts, accepted gifts. Silence. Silence hid knives. Sienna finished stacking the clothes and lifted the pile carefully, carrying it toward the walk-in closet. She passed behind him, close enough that he caught the faint scent of detergent on her sweater instead of perfume. That irritated him too. Most women wore fragrances that announced their arrival 5 seconds before they entered a room. Sienna smelled like clean cotton. She paused at the closet door. "Are you heading out?" she asked, voice soft, casual, no suspicion, no demand. Just curiosity. Dominic studied her profile, the curve of her cheek, the calm in her eyes, that infuriating calm. "Yes." "Dinner meeting?" He hesitated. A half-second. She noticed everything. "Something like that." She nodded and slid the hangers onto the rack. Silk suits hung beside cotton dresses she'd bought herself. Designer labels brushed against fabric tags that still had handwritten prices. He watched her straighten a crooked hanger, the movement automatic. Domestic. Unimpressed. "You don't need to fold those," he said suddenly. "Staff handles laundry." She looked at him then. Really looked. There was no fear in her eyes. No calculation. Just mild surprise. "I don't mind." That answer again. Not "thank you." Not "of course." Not "I'll stop." Just "I don't mind." Dominic exhaled through his nose. "You married a billionaire." She tilted her head slightly. "I married you." The words landed wrong. Not because they were romantic. Because they were simple. Too simple. He didn't answer. She waited. When he stayed silent, she turned back to the closet. Dismissed. That was how it felt. Not challenged. Not impressed. Dismissed. Dominic pushed away from the mirror and crossed the bedroom in long strides. "You could buy new clothes," he said. She glanced over her shoulder. "I have clothes. I mean better ones." She smiled faintly. "They work. They don't fit this place." Her brows knit slightly. "Do they have to?" There it was. That soft pushback. Not defiant. Not loud. Just stubborn enough to make him want to press harder. You live here. She gestured around them. For now. For now. Temporary. He stared at her. What does that mean? She blinked. It means this is where we are. Not where we'll always be. Not our home. Where we are. Dominic felt something twist low in his chest. Annoyance. Yes. That. Definitely that. He picked up his jacket and slipped it on, the fabric sliding smoothly over his shoulders. You don't like this life. She shook her head. That's not what I said. You don't take advantage of it. She considered. I appreciate it. That's different. She met his gaze now. I think maybe. Maybe what? Maybe you think wanting is the same as valuing. The words were soft, but they landed sharp. Dominic's lips thinned. Wanting drives everything. She shrugged. Not everything. He stared at her, searching for something: envy, resentment, hunger. There was nothing, just that steady calm. It made him uneasy. Most people leaned forward around him. She leaned back. He checked his watch after all. Don't wait up. She nodded. Drive safe. Not don't be late. Not I'll miss you. Drive safe. He paused at the door. Look back. She had already returned to arranging the closet. As if he were background noise. As if his exit didn't shift the gravity of the room. That was when the thought crystallized, sharp, cold, unwelcome. What if she wasn't grateful? What if she wasn't impressed? What if she wasn't here for the reasons everyone else assumed? Everyone thought she'd married him for money. A visa. A miracle. He'd let them. It amused him. But what if that story wasn't true? The idea irritated him more than if it had been. He left the bedroom without another word. The elevator ride down was silent. Glass walls revealed the city dropping away beneath him, traffic glittering like veins of light. Dominic stared at his reflection again. Still flawless, still powerful, and yet, he didn't like that something as small as a woman folding laundry had unsettled him. He didn't like that she hadn't looked sad, or eager, or dependent. He didn't like that she'd said for now. By the time the elevator reached the lobby, a decision had already begun forming. Unclear. Half-shaped. But hungry. If Sienna Vance wasn't with him for the money, then he needed to know why. Dominic stepped into the waiting car. Rain streaking the glass as the door shut behind him, already turning over one chilling thought in his mind. How do you test someone who doesn't seem to want anything at all? Divorce lawyers were expensive. Dominic Thorne hated expensive. Not because he couldn't afford them. He could buy half of Manhattan with a flick of his finger. No, it was the principle. Paying meant losing. Paying meant admitting that a system outside his control could dictate terms. And Dominic Thorne had never admitted defeat. Not in business, not in the boardroom, not even in personal matters. He pushed back from his mahogany desk, the leather chair creaking softly. The rain streaked down the penthouse windows in thin silver lines, blurring the city below. The skyline of Manhattan looked cold and detached. Just like him, it reflected everything he valued: order, power, money, and the way people bent when he leaned forward. He looked at the folder before him. Legal jargon, numbers, pre-nuptial loopholes, standard procedure, boring procedure, expensive procedure. No, there had to be a better way, a cleaner way, a faster way. He leaned forward, tapping the glass surface with his fingers. Test, he murmured, almost to himself. She has to show me who she really is. That word gave him a thrill. Scientific, precise, calculated. A test would strip away pretenses. And he would win either way. Dominic picked up his phone, pressing it against his ear. His tone was casual, effortless, as if he were discussing the weather rather than setting a trap. "Sienna," he said. "Yes." "You'll meet an investor tonight," he continued smoothly. "The Meridian Tower. VIP Lounge. 10 o'clock. I'm tied up in meetings." She didn't hesitate, didn't question, didn't ask why. "Of course," she replied simply. Dominic's lips curled without him noticing. The faint twist of amusement was sharper than any blade. Other women would have protested, demanded to know the name, the stakes, the size of the deal. They would have pried until they felt in control. Sienna. She nodded and accepted. That was what unnerved him. There was no protest, no jealousy, no eager calculation. Nothing. Just acceptance. Interesting, he thought. Dangerous even. He pressed a hidden button under his desk. Within minutes, 2 men arrived. One carried a black hard case, the other wheeled a silver rack of carefully folded fabrics, each sealed in plastic. The disguise team had been his secret weapon for years, masters at turning someone recognizable into someone unrecognizable in under an hour. 30 minutes, Dominic said. His voice was crisp, commanding. The team nodded and began their work efficiently, methodically. The mask came first. A silicone masterpiece, pale yet textured, with creases along the cheeks and forehead, pores painted individually. It smelled faintly of chemicals, but Dominic didn't care. It wasn't meant to smell good. It was meant to deceive. He held it up, feeling the weight in his hands. He could already sense the transformation. A new identity, a new face, a new power. Next came the beard. Thick and dark, threaded with silver strands. The fake hair was woven into a thin net, attached meticulously to align with the mask. Dominic adjusted it in the mirror, testing angles, seeing a face that wasn't his own yet carried his arrogance in every shadowed line. Contacts were inserted into his eyes, tinting them an amber shade. The lenses distorted his natural gaze. He looked in the mirror and did not see himself. He saw someone else entirely. Finally, the robe. Silk, black with gold embroidery. Heavy enough to command presence without announcing it. He draped it over his shoulders and felt the weight of authority settle over him like armor. Then came the voice. A small coin-sized device rested against his throat. With it, he could modulate tone, accent, cadence. He practiced slowly, dragging vowels, emphasizing consonants. "Good evening," he said, then repeated again and again, adjusting pitch and rhythm. Hours passed like minutes. Each layer added distance between Dominic Thorne and the woman downstairs. Each stroke of the brush, each attachment of the prosthetic, erased him further from the room. By nightfall, Dominic Thorne had vanished. In his place stood Sheikh al-Zahrani. He tilted his head toward the mirror, studying the stranger in the reflection. Every line sharp, every shadow precise, a foreign presence born of careful manipulation. He tested a phrase, letting it roll off his tongue. "Your husband's company is bleeding. Only I can save it." The sound startled him, not because of the words, but because he knew how they would land on her. He smiled. He was ready. She would break. She would plead. She would grasp at money, at freedom, at excuses, and then he would know the truth. The car was waiting downstairs. A black sedan engine purring softly, tinted windows. The city was slick with rain, reflecting every neon sign in fractured light. He stepped out onto the marble terrace, robe catching the wind. Mask secure, voice steady. He was no longer Dominic. He was power in disguise, observation in motion, the architect of a simple, perfect test. Yet as he watched the street from above, he couldn't shake the thought that maybe, just maybe, tests were unpredictable. That perhaps The person he intended to expose had already been observing him long before he ever set a trap. He pressed a button on the remote. Lights dimmed. Doors locked. Every measure in place. She would arrive soon, and Sheikh al-Zahrani would finally meet her. Dominic adjusted the robe for the final time, glanced at the mirrored reflection of the unfamiliar face, and whispered to himself, "Let's see how long the quiet one stays silent." The VIP lounge hovered above the storm like a throne room in the clouds. Rain hammered against the glass, slashing jagged streaks down the surface, reflecting the city lights below in fractured neon. Lightning forked across the sky, illuminating the skyline for a fraction of a second, before darkness reclaimed it. Sienna stepped through the revolving doors alone, her umbrella dripping onto the polished marble floor. She closed it and tucked it under her arm, her coat buttoned neatly. Flat shoes silent against the tile. She looked painfully out of place. The air was thick with wealth, power, and subtle tension, the kind you felt more than heard. Gold, vine tables, velvet chairs, and crystal chandeliers glinted under soft lighting, designed to impress anyone who thought they were important. But Sienna moved through it as though she didn't belong, and in Dominic's mind, that made her perfect. Her gaze was calm, controlled. Nothing betrayed her thoughts. No awe, no hesitation. Dominic lounged in shadow, the heavy silk of the robe falling around him like a curtain of authority. His prosthetic mask covered his face, every line and wrinkle meticulously crafted. A beard threaded with gray caught the light subtly, and his amber eyes behind tinted lenses glinted with predatory calculation. A silver briefcase rested at his feet. It gleamed as though daring her to reach for it. He tested his voice again, lowering it, dragging vowels, perfecting the accent he knew she would notice. "You've arrived," he said. Smooth, deliberate, foreign, calculated. Sienna's eyes flicked to the briefcase, then to him, then back to the rain streaking down the glass walls. She didn't hesitate, didn't flinch. That made Dominic's chest tighten in a way he hadn't felt in years. Not irritation, not anger, surprise. Subtle. He adjusted the rope, letting the folds settle naturally. Every movement was measured. Every gesture designed to intimidate, to test, to provoke. She stepped further into the lounge. Her coat brushed lightly against the polished floor, each footfall silent, as if she were respecting the power she hadn't yet acknowledged. Dominic gestured toward a chair. The briefcase remained at his feet, almost glowing under the soft lighting. "Please, sit," he said. The accent roughened slightly when he stressed the last syllable. She didn't sit. She didn't even acknowledge the gesture. Instead, she stood still for a long moment, surveying the room with calm precision. Her hands were folded neatly in front of her, thumbs brushing lightly against each other. Not nervous. Not hesitant. Not eager. The silence stretched between them, thick and sharp. Dominic cleared his throat, letting the fake accent dip lower, heavy, commanding. "I am Sheikh al-Zahrani, a man who recognizes talent, loyalty, potential." Sienna's gaze remained steady, tracing the folds of the robe, the glint of the briefcase, the perfect angle of his posture. Her voice, when it came, was soft but deliberate. "And what exactly do you want from me?" Dominic's lips curved into a half smile. "Good," she asked, curiosity mixed with caution. That was promising. He gestured toward the briefcase. "This," he said, letting the word hang as though it carried more weight than it deserved. $10 million. Yours, if you leave your husband tonight. If you claim he has betrayed you. If you join me." Sienna's eyes flicked to the briefcase again. She didn't reach for it. She didn't flinch. She simply looked at it, then at him, calm, almost indifferent. Dominic leaned forward slightly, every movement measured, rehearsed. "Sign these papers," he said, letting the words taste of authority. "Admit he is unworthy, betrayed, incompetent. And the money is yours." A pause. Long enough for the storm outside to echo in the silence. Rain hammered harder, wind rattling the glass. Sienna tilted her head. Nothing in her expression betrayed fear, or greed, or confusion. Dominic's stomach twisted slightly. This was not how it was supposed to happen. He had expected hesitation, tears, pleading, the flinch of a woman cornered by power. Instead, she looked at him with eyes that were calm, cold, and calculating. "Do you really think money will move me?" she said softly. Her words were a whisper, but they cut sharper than any insult he could have imagined. Dominic's heartbeat sped. The briefcase suddenly seemed smaller, less significant. He leaned back in the chair, masking the sudden uncertainty that flickered in his chest. "And what will move you, then?" he asked, his voice still carrying the weight of Sheikh al-Zarani, though cracks of Dominic Thorne seeped through. Sienna's gaze wandered to the storm outside, lightning illuminating her profile. "Integrity," she said simply. "And truth." Dominic's mind raced. Every plan, every test, every trap he had prepared suddenly felt fragile. The briefcase at his feet became meaningless, and yet he couldn't look away. Her calmness was a weapon, her silence a challenge. He had expected her to be a trophy, to bend, to comply, to falter. Instead, she stood like a storm herself, silent, unbroken, untouchable. The irony twisted in his chest. He had come to trap her, to humiliate her, to prove dominance. And now he was on the defensive. Every instinct screamed at him to escalate, to threaten, to cajole. But he paused, because she had already outmaneuvered him with nothing more than poise and quiet. A test, yes. That's what this was. And she had passed before he could even begin. Lightning struck again outside, illuminating the crystal chandeliers, the rain-slicked city below, and her calm, impervious stance. Dominic Thorne, hidden behind the mask of Sheikh al-Zarani, felt an unfamiliar chill. The kind that comes when the hunter realizes the prey may have been hunting him all along. Sienna took a slow step forward, eyes locked on the briefcase. She smiled faintly, almost imperceptibly, and whispered under her breath, "You're late, Dominic. And your accent is terrible." Dominic slid the silver briefcase across the marble table. It moved with a soft scrape, deliberate, meant to echo like a warning. The locks clicked open in the soft glow of the lounge lights. Inside, stacks of cash reflected the crystal chandeliers above, piles so large they seemed almost surreal. Each bundle was pressed perfectly, the edges sharp, the scent of freshly minted bills faint, but unmistakable. Dominic lowered his voice, letting the fake accent roll heavy across the words. "Your husband," he said, slow, deliberate, eyes locked on her, "is bleeding money. I can save him. But—" he leaned forward, fingers brushing the edge of the briefcase, as if emphasizing its weight. "But only if you leave him tonight." Sienna's eyes didn't move. They didn't flinch. Not even a flicker of surprise. Dominic's lips twitched into a grin, half amused, half concealing the tension he felt under the mask. "Sign these papers," he continued. "Admit he has failed you. Admit he betrayed you. Admit." His words lingered, thick with expectation. "That you deserve better than him." Her gaze didn't waver. It was calm, measured, unshaken. "And come with me," he finished, letting the words hang in the space between them like smoke. The storm outside raged. Rain streaked the glass. Wind rattled the window frames. Thunder rolled low and deep. Silence swallowed the room. Dominic waited. He expected shaking hands. He expected tears. He expected greed, desperation, flinching. Instead, he saw something else. Sienna's gaze hardened. Not hurt. Not fear. Predatory. Calculated. Sharp. Dominic felt it immediately, the shift in energy. Something dangerous simmered beneath the surface, quiet, invisible, but undeniable. He cleared his throat, adjusted the robe, straightened the mask. Small gestures, trying to reclaim authority, trying to assert dominance. Is that hesitation? He asked carefully, letting the fake accent falter slightly, testing. Her lips curved faintly, almost imperceptibly, but her eyes remained icy. I do not hesitate, she said. The words were calm, simple, cold. Dominic's stomach tightened. The sense of control he had carried since entering the lounge felt slippery, like wet glass beneath his fingers. He leaned in slightly, hands planted on the table. He needed to pressure her, needed to break her. The storm outside seemed to echo his pulse, fast and heavy. You could have this, he said, gesturing toward the cash. All of it. A life of luxury, freedom, power. One signature. One word. She tilted her head, slight, just enough to indicate thoughtfulness. Do you think money will ever make a person into someone they are not? She asked softly. The question caught him off guard. Sharp, simple. His hand twitched. He hadn't expected philosophical debate. Not in the middle of a trap he had orchestrated meticulously for weeks. Dominic forced a laugh, masking irritation with charm. It can buy loyalty. It can buy obedience. It can buy anything. Sienna's gaze narrowed. The faintest trace of a smirk appeared, but her composure remained intact. Not everything, she whispered. The words hung in the air like smoke. Dominic blinked. Masked face unmoving, but inside doubt crept. He straightened again, trying to regain the momentum of the trap. He opened the briefcase wider, letting the light hit the bills, letting the weight of money scream its presence. Think carefully, he said, voice deliberate, controlled. $10 million. Yours. One decision. One word. She didn't move toward the case. She didn't even glance at it again. Dominic felt a twinge, almost disbelief. This was supposed to be the moment. He had rehearsed it 100 times. This was the moment she bent. Instead, she remained still. Her calm was unnerving, almost supernatural. He tried a different tactic, leaning lower, letting the foreign accent smooth over his words, almost coaxing. This could change your life. Everything you've wanted, wealth, power, freedom, is here. Sienna's voice was soft, deliberate. Everything I've wanted does not include betraying someone who trusts me. The words landed like a blow. Precision. Focus. And beneath the calm exterior, he felt the subtle sting of shame. He had expected corruption, and instead, he was facing principle. Dominic exhaled slowly, letting the fake accent falter for just a fraction. He adjusted the mask, feeling the synthetic skin tug slightly at the edges. Small, imperceptible imperfections mirrored his internal unease. She remained motionless, but her presence dominated the room. Silence no longer protected her, it empowered her. Dominic's mind raced. He had calculated every reaction, predicted every hesitation, every trap accounted for, every plan rehearsed. And yet, here she was unshaken, unyielding, unreadable. He leaned back slightly, mind flickering to possibilities. Could she be pretending? Could this calm exterior be another trap? The thought made his pulse spike. He could feel the sweat beneath the prosthetic mask, despite the cool air. He reached forward, fingers brushing against the briefcase again. The polished silver reflected the light. 10 million reasons, each one a promise, a test, a temptation. She did not move. Not toward it. Not away from it. She simply stared, and in that stare, Dominic felt something he hadn't felt in years. Uncertainty. Vulnerability. A quiet, creeping fear that he had underestimated her. He cleared his throat again. Words felt hollow. Tactics seemed shallow. Threats meaningless. Because she wasn't listening to them. She was watching him, calculating, measuring, waiting. He realized, in a flash, that she had already seen through the facade, the accent, the costume, the theatrics. His trap was no longer his own. The briefcase, $10 million, the role of Sheikh al-Zurani, it all seemed suddenly irrelevant. The storm outside intensified, rain pelting the glass, thunder vibrating through the floor. Dominic realized that he had walked into a different storm entirely, one he could not control, one he had underestimated. And Sienna, standing perfectly still, unflinching, predatory in her calmness, was at its center. Sienna's lips curved into the faintest, almost imperceptible smirk as she whispered, "Do you really think this is enough to sway me?" Sienna nudged the briefcase away. Slowly, deliberately. Her fingers brushed the polished metal, the sound faint against the storm outside, yet it resonated in the lounge like a declaration. Dominic froze. He leaned forward instinctively, the fake authority of Sheikh al-Zurani faltering. She tilted her head slightly, her dark eyes fixed on him, calculating, unyielding. "You're late, Dominic," she said softly. The words landed heavier than any insult he had planned. A crack of thunder shook the glass walls. Rain streaked like molten silver down the pane, lightning slicing across the city, illuminating her calm, measured face. "And your accent," she added, almost a whisper, "is terrible." Every inch of control Dominic had curated for weeks collapsed in a heartbeat. His spine stiffened, his chest tightened, his fingers clenched at the edge of the chair. He couldn't move. He shouldn't have moved. But he did. The mask came off in a single motion, ripped from his face. Breathing hard, gasping, exposed. He stared at her, the raw Dominic Thorne replacing Sheikh al-Zurani. The face she had known, yet had always underestimated. "How?" he began. Words faltered. The rehearsed confidence evaporated. She smiled faintly, patient, almost amused. Then he laughed, sharp, manic, full of disbelief and fury. "You hesitated," he snapped, voice cracking at the edges. "That hesitation, that was enough!" He slammed his hand against the marble table. The briefcase rattled, coins and bills shifting slightly, but she didn't flinch. "I'll divorce you for breach of trust," he continued, pacing the small space between the table and the glass wall. "You'll leave with nothing." She didn't move, didn't blink. She simply stood, and the air changed. Something intangible shifted in the room, heavier than the storm outside. Dominic tried to assert dominance again, hand outstretched toward the briefcase, voice booming. "You don't understand!" But she cut him off. "You never understood," she said softly. Calm, measured, predatory. Her presence expanded, filling the space with authority, replacing the tension he thought he had manufactured. Dominic felt it immediately, a weight, invisible but real. The room no longer obeyed him. He had planned every detail, the disguise, the trap, the $10 million, the intimidation. Every scenario calculated, every reaction predicted. And yet here he was, stripped of all certainty. She stepped closer, slow, deliberate. Not threatening, not aggressive. Just precise. Her gaze never wavered. Dominic's hands twitched. He wanted to reach for control, to reassert himself, to dominate the conversation, the room, her. But every instinct screamed that this was no longer a game he could win with force. She paused mid-step, letting him absorb her calm, letting the storm outside underscore the tension. "You always thought silence was weakness," she said, her voice low, resonant. "You assumed kindness was a flaw, that patience was a loophole, that humility was a cage." He staggered slightly back, shocked by her clarity. by the precision of her words. The briefcase sat between them, now meaningless. $10 million suddenly seemed like a trinket in comparison to the shift in power. Dominic's mind raced. Every plan, every trap, every rehearsal flashed through him. She had dismantled it without raising her voice, without trembling, without taking a single step toward the cash. His pulse accelerated. The synthetic mask pressed against his skin in memory, suffocating in its absence. "You underestimated me," she continued, slowly, deliberately, letting the words sink in. "And that was your mistake." Thunder cracked again, louder this time. The glass walls vibrated. Rain slashed at the panes, wind tugging at her coat, her hair sticking slightly to her face. But she did not move, not even to brush it away. Dominic's lips thinned. He had expected anger, tears, resistance, a plea. Instead, he faced composure, unbreakable, impenetrable composure. His laugh had died down, leaving only a bitter rasp. He stepped closer, towering over her physically, trying to reclaim the room, the trap, the night. "You think you can just—" he began, but she cut him off again. "I didn't come here for your money," she said, voice calm, each word deliberate. "I didn't come here to be tested." Dominic stopped mid-step, confusion and disbelief battling with the rage burning in his chest. Her words were a scalpel, cutting through the veil of Sheikh al-Zahrani, cutting through the illusion he had tried to create. He realized, with a surge of unease, that he had been outplayed before the game even began. Sienna took another slow step forward. The briefcase was forgotten now. The money, the plan, the trap, it no longer mattered. She looked at him directly, unwavering, and Dominic understood that this was no longer about wealth, or deceit, or revenge. This was about power, her power, and it dwarfed his. He staggered slightly, stunned by the realization. She leaned closer, her presence dominating the room like the storm itself, and whispered, voice soft but filled with steel, "You thought you were testing me. But Dominic, it's you who has been exposed." Dominic's chest tightened. He felt the weight of every misstep, every overconfidence, every assumption he had made for years. She had not only survived his test, she had reversed it. Every move he had calculated had failed. Every prediction rendered meaningless. Sienna straightened, and the air in the room seemed to solidify around her, heavy and commanding. He wanted to speak, to regain control, to assert dominance, but no words came. She simply smiled faintly, that calm, measured smile, as though she had been waiting for this moment all along. Dominic's mind raced, searching for a way out, a strategy, an advantage. But he realized there was none. The storm outside thundered, rain slashing the glass in silver streaks. And for the first time, Dominic Thorne felt powerless. She stepped forward again, closer to the briefcase, closer to him, and the subtle shift in her stance made him realize she was no longer a wife trapped in a test. She was a force he had never anticipated, and he had just walked straight into it. Sienna leaned down toward the briefcase, her dark eyes locked on his, and whispered, "You played the wrong woman, Dominic. And now you're the one who's exposed." Sienna pulled the tablet from the inner pocket of her coat. It gleamed faintly in the low lounge light, black screen reflecting the storm outside. Dominic's eyes followed the motion, every muscle tensing. She swiveled it slowly, deliberately, toward him. The display came alive. Corporate structures, debt ledgers, board votes, shell holdings. Every detail, every number, every connection mapped out with surgical precision. Dominic squinted, leaning closer, trying to process the layers of complexity before him. This wasn't just data. This was dominion, authority, control. SV legacy, she said softly, calmly, letting the words land like a hammer. 70% of Thorn Enterprises' liabilities. Dominic felt the color drain from his face. He backed up slightly, one hand rising instinctively, though it trembled. Sienna Vance, he whispered, disbelief cracking his voice. She tilted her head slightly, eyes steady, gaze unflinching. My father, she continued, calm as snowfall, serene yet unyielding, owned Europe's largest private equity group. Each word felt deliberate, measured, precise. Dominic staggered back, the chair behind him scraping the marble as he braced himself. He had planned to humiliate her, to manipulate, to dominate. And now he realized how utterly wrong he had been. I used my money, she continued, voice low, calm, resonant, to save your company for 3 years. Dominic froze, every thought tumbling over itself. 3 years. Every reckless investment, every failure, every hidden debt covered. His mind raced, unable to reconcile the image of the helpless, obedient wife he thought he had married with the woman standing in front of him. She tilted the tablet slightly, highlighting the movements of capital, the silent transfers, the hidden transactions. Waiting. Watching. Calculating. You see, she said softly, almost gently. I wanted to see if you'd ever love me without knowing. Without the leverage of money. Without the illusion of control. Dominic's mouth went dry. Words failed him. The storm outside seemed distant now. The rain, the thunder, the lightning, all irrelevant compared to the quiet storm in the room. He realized, in a heartbeat, that everything he had built his perception of power on had been fragile. She had owned his company from the shadows. His control had been an illusion. He staggered, hand instinctively brushing at the empty space of the mask he had thrown aside. She leaned in slightly, tilting the tablet so that the intricate charts and legal structures glowed under the soft chandelier light. Every debt, every liability, every vote that kept me from being questioned, she said, voice still calm, was mine to control. Always mine. Dominic felt a cold weight settle in his chest. The arrogance, the entitlement, the belief that he had set the rules, all crumbling like wet sand under his fingers. His blue eyes widened behind the natural shadow of the mask he had worn minutes before. Sienna's gaze did not waver. It never did. You thought you were testing me, she said, voice low but sharp, each word like a scalpel. But Dominic, it's you who has been tested. Dominic took a shaky step back, breath hitching. 3 years, he muttered, voice barely audible, disbelief mingling with fear. 3 years, you. She shook her head ever so slightly, almost pitying. Almost. Her hand rested lightly on the edge of the tablet, letting him see the immensity of her control without pressing. I married you because I thought I saw a soul behind that greed, she said softly, letting the words cut deeper than any attack he could have prepared. I stayed because I wanted to believe you could see me as me. Dominic's pulse raced. Anger, fear, admiration, humiliation, all tangled together inside him. He had tried to trap her, to humiliate her. And yet here he was, standing in a glassed penthouse, watching her reveal the truth with quiet authority, watching his empire fold under the weight of her calculated patience. The storm outside intensified. Lightning reflected across the glass walls. The sound of thunder shook the room, but Dominic barely noticed. Everything was internal now, his mind spinning, his ego shattered. He reached for words, but none came. She held the tablet up, letting it glow, letting the details press into his mind. Every chart, every number, every hidden hand laid bare. You thought I was weak? She said softly, almost smiling. But patience, Dominic, patience is a weapon you never learn to recognize until it's too late. Dominic stumbled, hands clenching at the edge of the table. He realized finally, that he had underestimated her in every possible way. Not just as a wife. Not just as a woman. But as a force capable of dismantling him completely. He took a deep, shuddering breath, trying to pull himself together. The illusion of control he had carried for decades, the arrogance, the entitlement, the calculated dominance, felt like a mask he had worn for the world, and she had removed it, piece by piece, without raising her voice. Her eyes never left his. Dominic tried to stand taller, tried to reclaim presence, but every movement felt sluggish, weak, powerless. She had him in the center of her storm, and he realized that no mask, no accent, no briefcase, no wealth could save him. The tablet glowed between them like a beacon of truth. Every number, every vote, every holding, proof of his impotence, her mastery, her patience. The realization hit him like lightning. He had walked straight into a trap he didn't even know existed. And the woman he thought he could manipulate had been guiding the board, the money, and his fate all along. She took a slow step forward, tablet in hand, eyes locked on his. Dominic felt the weight of inevitability pressing down on him, heavier than the storm outside, heavier than any failure he had ever known. He wanted to speak, to argue, to resist, but nothing formed, no words, no defenses. She let the tablet rest on the table now, angled toward him, letting him absorb the immensity of her control. "You underestimated me," she said quietly, voice calm but deadly in its precision. "And now, Dominic, you will see exactly how it feels to be exposed." Dominic's breath caught. His mind spun with disbelief, rage, and a growing realization that his life, his empire, his control, everything was no longer his own. He could only stare, trapped by her calm authority, by the glow of the tablet that held the proof of his downfall. Sienna's hand hovered above the tablet, eyes locked on his, and whispered softly, "5 minutes ago, Dominic, you stopped being the CEO. And now you're trespassing in your own empire." Two men entered the lounge, their presence sharp, precise, calculated. Tailored suits, polished shoes, subtle cologne that marked authority without announcing it. Dominic's lawyers. They moved like predators in a controlled environment, scanning the room, acknowledging nothing, yet asserting everything. Dominic instinctively straightened, chest puffed, trying to reclaim the authority he had lost in the past hour. He had faced markets collapsing, investors panicking, competitors circling like sharks. But nothing in his 33 years had prepared him for this. One lawyer stepped forward, thin folder in hand. Eyes narrowed, voice low, precise. He cleared his throat. "As of 5 minutes ago," he said, deliberate, measured, SV Legacy has called in its debts. Dominic blinked, mind struggling to process. The tablet, the charts, the shell holdings, the debt structure she had revealed moments before. It wasn't a threat. It was reality. A shiver ran down his spine. He tried to speak, to argue, to deny. Nothing came out. His mouth opened, closed, soundless. "You are no longer CEO," the lawyer continued, calm, unyielding, delivering words heavier than any weight Dominic had lifted in his life. Dominic staggered back, hand gripping the edge of the table for support. The briefcase sat between them, insignificant now. The currency of ambition useless in the face of authority he had never controlled. "And you are trespassing," the second lawyer added, voice steady. Final. Dominic's chest tightened, every muscle tensed. Blue eyes darted between the tablet, Sienna, the lawyers trying to find leverage. There was none. The realization sank in slowly, like ice creeping through veins. He had ruled his empire with precision, arrogance, and fear. Every board vote, every legal loophole, every balance sheet, he thought he had dominated it all. Yet here he was exposed, powerless, stripped of every mask he had worn. The storm outside mirrored the chaos within him. Lightning reflected in the glass, illuminating Sienna standing still, calm, poised, unshaken. Dominic's breath came in short bursts. He wanted to yell, to threaten, to reclaim what was his, but the weight of reality pressed down on him. The lawyer's eyes were steady. No hesitation. No emotion, just procedure. Authority. Enforcement. Sienna stepped closer to him, tablet in hand. She didn't speak immediately. She let him absorb the magnitude of what had just occurred. Dominic's mind raced. Every deal, every investment, every calculated risk he had ever made. It had been propped up by her silent influence. The empire he thought he controlled was, in truth, hers all along. "You underestimated me," she said softly, voice calm, slicing through the tension in the room. "You assumed you were the only strategist, the only player." Dominic's jaw tightened. His lips pressed together, trying to summon authority, trying to craft a response that would reassert dominance. Nothing came. She held his gaze, eyes sharp, commanding. The lawyers remained silent, standing slightly behind her, guardians of the reality he had refused to see. Dominic stepped forward, trying to regain composure, voice shaking despite his efforts. This is impossible." Sienna's lips curved faintly, just enough to unsettle him further. "5 minutes ago," she said, almost a whisper, "your reign ended. Not because of luck, not because of revenge, but because patience, planning, and observation always trump arrogance." Dominic's mind struggled to accept the truth. He had been the hunter, and suddenly, he realized he was the prey. The storm outside intensified. Rain lashed at the glass walls, wind tugging at her coat, but she remained still, unshaken. He looked at the lawyers, then at the glowing tablet, then at the briefcase, and finally at her. Every instinct screamed to attack, to reclaim control, to assert dominance. But deep down he knew he had no path forward. He had miscalculated. Every step, every assumption, every glance at her humble demeanor had blinded him to the power she wielded quietly, invisibly. She had controlled his empire from the shadows. Every debt, every vote, every corporate move orchestrated in silence while he believed he dominated. Dominic staggered, hand brushing at his temple. He felt disoriented, defeated. Sienna's calm authority enveloped the room. Her presence was magnetic, oppressive, undeniable. The briefcase, $10 million, the trap he had crafted, it meant nothing. All that mattered now was the truth she had revealed, and the law that backed it. Dominic swallowed hard. Pride, arrogance, and ego fought for dominance in his chest, but the fight was futile. Sienna stepped even closer, the soft glow of the tablet illuminating her face. "You thought you could play me," she said, calm and cold. "But Dominic, you were playing in my kingdom all along." Dominic's lips parted. He wanted words, threats, excuses, anything, but he found none. The lawyers shifted slightly, a subtle reminder of the authority they represented. Dominic felt the weight of inevitability press down like the storm itself. Every empire he had built, every victory he had claimed, every assumption about control, gone. He realized finally that he had underestimated her, her patience, her intelligence, her ability to see through arrogance and expose weakness. The storm outside roared, but inside the lounge, silence dominated, heavy and oppressive, punctuated only by the subtle hum of the tablet's glow. Dominic's blue eyes flicked to her. The woman he thought he could manipulate, humiliate, control, she was untouchable. He staggered slightly, mind racing, chest tight, ego bruised beyond repair. The briefcase remained on the table, now meaningless. $10 million irrelevant against the reality of his exposure. Sienna's gaze held his unwavering, relentless, and he realized that his world had shifted in the span of 5 minutes. Every plan he had, every assumption he had carried, every strategy, she had already dismantled it. And she had done it with quiet, controlled precision. Dominic's mind spun. Fear, disbelief, frustration, and admiration collided within him. The empire he thought was his, the control he believed absolute, shattered. He could only stare. She stepped slightly closer, tablet in hand, every movement deliberate. Her eyes locked on his. Calm, calculating, commanding. And Dominic realized the most terrifying truth of all. He was no longer the one in control. The second lawyer cleared his throat, voice low and final, and said, "Dominic Thorne, the building you are standing in is no longer yours. SV Legacy has taken full control. Step aside, or you will be removed." Sienna stepped closer. Dominic's hands trembled slightly as he clutched the discarded mask, the synthetic edges pressing cold against his palm. She didn't rush. She moved with measured precision, like a chess master closing in on the king. Every step deliberate, silent, inevitable. Her heels clicked softly against the marble floor, echoing faintly in the vast lounge, marking each heartbeat with authority. Dominic's blue eyes tracked her, wide, unsteady, disbelief and anger mixing with a shivering realization. He had believed he controlled this night. He had believed he orchestrated every move, every reaction, every whisper of tension. And yet here she was, closer than ever, commanding the space, owning the room, radiating power that made the storm outside feel secondary. Her fingers reached out, brushing the mask from his hands. "You tried to trap a queen in a disguise," she said, soft but sharp. A single statement heavy enough to pin him in place. Dominic froze. Her grip was firm, unyielding, yet graceful. She held the mask lightly, as if it were a trivial thing, an object of mockery rather than a symbol of control. Her gaze held his unblinking, piercing, and the air around them seemed to thicken with tension. He swallowed hard. She had stripped him of his traps, dismantled his authority, and now stood poised to claim the final victory of the night. Her lips curved faintly, not a smile, a smirk, just enough to convey that she knew the magnitude of what she had accomplished. Dominic's mind raced, frantic. He opened his mouth to argue, to defend, to assert dominance, but the words died in his throat. There was nothing left to say. She turned slightly, letting her presence dominate the space, letting the storm outside reflect the intensity of the moment inside. "But you didn't realize," she said softly, each word deliberate, drawing him closer into the gravity of the revelation. Dominic leaned forward involuntarily, as if to interrupt, but she held him with a glance. "You were already in my kingdom." Her voice dropped, low, controlled, filled with steel wrapped in velvet. The words struck him like thunder, reverberating through every bone, every fiber of his being. He felt his chest tighten, ego bruised, authority stripped, pride shattered. For 33 years, Dominic Thorne had never felt this powerless. He had conquered markets, outmaneuvered rivals, manipulated boardrooms, and yet a single woman standing in a storm-drenched penthouse had undone him entirely. Sienna tilted her head, letting him process the finality of her statement. The tablet rested on the marble between them, glowing faintly, illuminating the intricate web of control she had exercised without a hint of arrogance. Dominic's gaze flicked to it, then to the briefcase, then back to her. He realized fully, painfully, that everything he had believed about control, manipulation, and dominance had been wrong. She had been the player all along. He had been merely a piece on her board. The two lawyers behind her shifted subtly, their presence a silent reinforcement of her authority. Dominic's pulse throbbed in his temples. He wanted to shout, to curse, to storm out, to reclaim a shred of dignity. But the storm inside him was mirrored only by the storm outside the glass walls. Every instinct screamed to fight, to resist, to prove he could still dominate. But he knew it was futile. Sienna had dismantled him without raising her voice. Her patience, her planning, her intelligence, her calm. It had been a weapon sharper than any briefcase of cash or mask of disguise. Dominic's shoulders slumped slightly. For the first time, he felt what it was like to be utterly powerless, to have his world rewritten in the hands of someone else. Sienna's gaze softened just slightly. Not mercy. Not weakness. Just the quiet satisfaction of someone who had claimed what was rightfully hers. She moved closer to the tablet now, resting a hand lightly on it. "The game," she said, voice calm, resonant, "was never yours to win, Dominic. It belonged to me the entire time." He swallowed hard, struggling to maintain the illusion of composure. But his throat felt tight, dry, and unfamiliar. She circled him slightly, subtle, elegant, predatory in her grace. Dominic tried to speak. Words formed, dissolved, faltered. I. Sienna tilted her head again, cutting him off with a quiet authority that demanded acknowledgement without confrontation. "You underestimated me," she whispered, almost gently. "And that was your mistake." The storm outside mirrored the tension inside the penthouse. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the vast Manhattan skyline, rain lashing violently against the floor, to ceiling windows. Dominic felt the weight of inevitability pressing down. Everything he had controlled, every empire, every debt, every assumption, gone. He realized fully, painfully, that she had outplayed him entirely. And she had done it with nothing but quiet precision and an unshakable calm. Sienna stepped closer, brushing the edge of the briefcase with her fingertips, her presence dominating the space. Dominic's fingers twitched, gripping the edge of the table for support. He had tried to trap her. He had tried to humiliate her. And now, he understood that the real trap had been set for him all along. She smiled faintly, a soft smirk, letting him feel the enormity of the power shift. "You thought you were the king," she said softly. "But Dominic, kings fall, and queens they rise." Dominic's pulse raced. Thoughts tumbled chaotically. Fear, disbelief, and reluctant admiration tangled inside him. He tried to stand taller, to reclaim a shred of dignity. But every gesture felt small, insignificant, powerless. The lawyers behind her shifted slightly, a silent reminder that her authority was reinforced, backed, absolute. Dominic realized that the penthouse, the briefcase, the empire he had ruled, they all belonged to her now. She was the architect. He was the spectator. The storm outside mirrored the turmoil inside him, but Sienna remained unmoved. She had claimed her kingdom. He had walked straight into it. And he knew, finally, that he would never be the same. Sienna held the mask in one hand, tablet in the other, and whispered, "Step aside, Dominic, or watch as I remove you from everything you ever thought was yours permanently." Security rushed in, swift, silent, professional. Dominic Thorne's eyes widened, panic threading through the usual arrogance. His mouth opened, ready to bark orders, ready to reclaim control, but the words caught in his throat. He tried to take a step forward, to assert dominance, but the officers moved like shadows, blocking, guiding, containing him. "Wait!" he shouted, voice sharp, demanding, a hurricane trapped in a penthouse. "Security!" he barked. tone trembling despite the effort. "You know who I am? I am." But no one listened. The words fell flat in the polished room, swallowed by authority he could no longer claim. Dominic's pulse thundered. Rage, disbelief, humiliation tangled together, pressing against every vein. He tried another tactic, threats. "You can't do this!" he spat, pointing at Sienna, at the tablet, at the glowing structure of his empire. The lawyers remained silent, expressionless, a subtle reminder that the law, the structure, the power, it all belonged to her now. Dominic's voice escalated, desperation seeping through the cracks of arrogance. "I built this company! I made it! You can't just—" One officer stepped closer. Calm, precise, practiced. "You're trespassing, Mr. Thorne. Please follow our instructions." Dominic staggered, hand gripping the table for support, chest heaving. He glared at Sienna, searching for some flicker of mercy, some sign of weakness. There was none. She walked past him slowly, deliberately, heels clicking softly against the marble. Each step was measured, authoritative. A silent declaration of victory. "He can't afford to be here," she told them, voice calm, resonant, carrying the weight of law, power, and finality. Dominic's mind scrambled. Every instinct, every learned behavior, every assumption about control crumbled under the weight of reality. He tried pleading, begging, bargaining. "Listen to me! I can fix this! I can!" But every attempt met the same wall of silence and authority. The lawyers watched, expressionless, reinforcing the truth he refused to accept. He staggered, the taste of failure bitter on his tongue, every ounce of pride shredded. Sienna continued walking, ignoring the chaos he created, ignoring the storm in his blue eyes. He turned toward the tablet, toward the briefcase, toward the empire he thought he controlled. Every number, every chart, every debt, his illusions shattered by patience, precision, and silent dominance. The security officers guided him toward the doors. He fought, instinctively, a desperate animal clinging to territory. But the grip on his arm was unyielding. He struggled, lungs burning, hands clawing at marble, at air, at the remnants of control. Sienna reached the door, paused, and glanced over her shoulder once. Her face was serene, calm, untouchable. Dominic's heart pounded. The world he had thought invincible, the skyscraper, the penthouse, the empire, now slipped from his grasp like sand through fingers. The storm outside greeted her, rain lashing against the glass in chaotic streaks. Umbrella open, chin lifted, coat flaring slightly in the wind. She stood like a queen surveying her city. Dominic's blue eyes followed her, disbelief mingling with rage, humiliation, and the first sparks of fear he had ever felt. The security officers moved him steadily forward. No hesitation, no mercy, no argument. He turned back to the lounge, to the tablet, to the briefcase, desperate for one last semblance of authority. It was gone. The cityscape beyond the glass windows blurred with rain, the thunder outside matching the turmoil in his chest. Every strategy he had ever relied on, every leverage, every assumption about power, it had been dismantled. Sienna had built a kingdom he never saw, orchestrated his downfall with patience, and now watched as her final move unfolded. He stumbled slightly, voice hoarse, attempting one last threat, one last attempt at dominance. You can't do this! I'm Dominic Thorne!" Her smile was faint, controlled, almost imperceptible. "I already did," she said softly, voice carrying through the storm. "And you, Dominic, just learned the hard way who truly rules here." The doors opened to the rain. He hesitated, heart racing, lungs burning. The cold, wet city pressed against his face, a mirror of the collapse he had just endured. Every step forward into the storm was a surrender. Security guided him out, and for the first time, he realized the full weight of loss, not just money, not just empire, but pride, power, and identity. Sienna followed, but not out the door. She remained inside, watching, calculating, unshaken. The storm swirled around her, umbrella a shield, heels clicking softly as she surveyed the city she now controlled. Dominic struggled to speak, to reclaim dignity, to demand attention. But every word fell into the night, drowned by the rain, the wind, and the realization of defeat. He glanced back through the glass one last time. Sienna's calm silhouette framed against the city, the tablet glowing faintly behind her, exuded power that dwarfed his desperation. The empire he had believed was his, now hers. He tried to force anger, to ignite rage, to reclaim even a shadow of authority. But all that remained was humiliation, disbelief, and the cold bite of inevitability. The city beyond the doors stretched vast and indifferent, thunder rolling, lightning slicing through dark clouds. Every instinct screamed to fight, but every reality pressed him forward into surrender. Dominic's pride, his ego, his lifetime of dominance, gone in a single night. Sienna remained inside, the calm center of the storm, untouched. Untouchable, the architect of his undoing. Rain soaked his coat, his hair plastered to his forehead, the cold cutting through him like the truth he had refused to see. He stumbled forward, escorted, powerless, every breath ragged with fury and shock. The briefcase remained behind, unopened, irrelevant. $10 million a trinket, compared to the authority he had lost. Sienna's gaze followed him, soft yet unyielding, a reminder that she had always been the one in control. Every step he took into the storm was a surrender, every shiver a mark of his failure. He tried to imagine a path back, some loophole, some chance to reclaim dominance. None existed. She had outplayed him at every turn, orchestrated every move, and dismantled every assumption. He felt small, exposed, humiliated. Every second in the rain a reminder of what he had lost. Sienna adjusted her umbrella, lifted her chin, and looked toward the city horizon. Dominic was escorted farther, the cold rain soaking him, the wind howling around him, every step a reminder that he had no kingdom left. The night swallowed him, every attempt at control vanishing into the storm. Sienna remained inside, queen of a city he had thought he ruled, silent, calculating, untouchable. And as the doors closed behind him, Dominic Thorne finally understood the full weight of his failure. Sienna stepped into the rain, umbrella above her, and whispered softly to the night, "Welcome to my kingdom, Dominic. Every empire has a queen, and tonight you learned the hard way who I am." Rain pounded the city, soaking Sienna's coat. But she didn't flinch. Her heels clicked against the wet pavement, each step echoing authority, command, inevitability. The umbrella she carried was more than protection. It was a crown, a shield against the chaos that had once surrounded her. Behind her, the penthouse glowed softly, a silent testament to the empire she now fully controlled. Dominic Thorne had been escorted away, his figure swallowed by the storm, his ego shattered, every ounce of arrogance stripped bare. Sienna inhaled deeply, the rain cooling her flushed cheeks, invigorating her. She allowed herself a brief glance up at the skyscrapers piercing the stormy sky. Manhattan stretched endlessly before her, vast, alive, and entirely within her grasp. The empire she had quietly orchestrated from the shadows now stood before her like a kingdom she had claimed without fire or blade. Only precision, patience, and resolve. The tablet rested safely in her bag, a symbol of strategy executed to perfection. Every ledger, every board vote, every shell company had been deployed to dismantle the illusion of his control. She smiled faintly, not out of triumph, but recognition of the journey. The patience, the observation, the calculated timing that had brought her to this moment. The rain drenched her hair, but it did not dampen her spirit. She raised her chin, letting the city lights reflect in her eyes, gleaming with quiet confidence. Security personnel waited discreetly behind her. Silent, professional, aware that the job was complete, and the Queen had emerged victorious. She did not need them now. She did not need a single bodyguard, a single lawyer. She had authority etched into every fiber of her being. Her gaze fell to the briefcase left behind. $10 million, meaningless in comparison to the leverage, control, and intellect she wielded. Money had never been the point. Dominion had always been hers to claim. She lifted the umbrella higher, letting the storm frame her silhouette against the vast skyline. The glass walls of the penthouse reflected her back to her, a queen standing above a city that had once been a playground for men like Dominic. She thought briefly of him, the man who had believed arrogance and wealth could mask incompetence, the man who had underestimated every subtlety of her mind. Dominic Thorne had walked into her trap, believing himself clever, and yet he had fallen, unarmed against her patience, unprepared for her intellect. The wind tugged at her coat. She let it flow unbound, as if embracing the chaos that had tested her patience. She stepped forward, letting the puddles ripple beneath her polished shoes. Each step was deliberate, confident, commanding. She could feel the weight of history shifting, the air charged with the knowledge that a new order had taken root. The empire, once thought fragile, now breathed through her. Every company, every holding, every decision that Dominic had assumed was his, now pulsed under her control, precise and unyielding. She stopped at the edge of the plaza outside the building, rain streaking down her face, blending with determination. A taxi splashed past, unaware, indifferent. The city moved around her, alive, thriving, oblivious to the subtle wars of wealth and power that had just concluded within its towers. She allowed herself a deep breath, cold rain filling her lungs, grounding her, reminding her that patience and intelligence are the sharpest weapons of all. Her phone buzzed. A message from one of her silent associates. Everything confirmed. All positions secured. She smiled faintly. The storm had ended for her, though it raged on outside. Dominic would survive. Perhaps. But he would never forget. Every glance at her would remind him of what he had lost. Every moment in his mind. Every attempt at dominance in future deals would be haunted by the Queen, who had outplayed him entirely. The city lights reflected in her eyes, electric and alive, like the pulse of her victory. She tilted her umbrella, letting the rain fall on her shoulders, as if the storm itself was bowing to her authority. No celebration, no fanfare, she didn't need it. Victory did not demand applause. It demanded respect, and she had earned it, carved it quietly, deliberately, with intellect and patience. Sienna's lips curved slightly. The faintest acknowledgement of the storm she had navigated, the empire she now fully commanded. The streets reflected her figure in puddles, doubled, magnified, as if the city itself recognized her emergence. She turned slightly, letting the reflection of the skyline stretch across the wet pavement, an endless city awaiting her decisions, her strategy, her authority. Every step was forward, away from the past, toward the empire she had quietly claimed. She did not look back. Dominic's shadow would linger, yes, but it would never touch the command she now held. She adjusted the umbrella, letting rain streak across the glass walls behind her, framing the penthouse that had once been his kingdom. And now, the light inside pulsed softly, a testament to her patience, intelligence, and resilience. The city below was alive with possibility. Every skyscraper a potential to dominate, to influence, to grow. Sienna inhaled again, letting the cool air fill her lungs, letting the storm embrace her like an old friend who finally recognized her strength. Her heels clicked against the wet stone, a rhythm that mirrored her heartbeat, deliberate, strong, unstoppable. The empire she had quietly orchestrated had survived every test, every betrayal, every false move Dominic had attempted. And she had emerged not just unscathed, but elevated. The tablet, the boards, the debts, the companies, all were instruments of her careful orchestration. She had proven a truth that wealth alone could never secure. Power required patience, intelligence, and observation. She had commanded silently, waiting, learning, acting only when every variable aligned. And now, she walked through the storm with absolute certainty. The umbrella above her framed her face, strong, resolute, a queen in every sense. The city whispered around her, indifferent yet alive, aware yet ignorant, as she claimed her space. Every puddle reflected her image, a solitary figure. Sovereign, commanding, untouchable. Dominic would survive, but he would never recover the illusion of dominance he had believed was his, and she would remain. The storm outside mirrored the storm she had endured, but unlike before, it could not touch her. Every decision, every move she had made had led to this singular point of empowerment. She stopped briefly, letting the rain cascade off her umbrella, letting the city pulse beneath her. No mask, no disguise, no illusion. Sienna Vance, queen strategist and absolute master of her empire. The wind tugged at her coat, rain dripping from the edges, and she lifted her chin to the horizon. Every detail of the city a reminder of the kingdom she now fully ruled. Her eyes flicked briefly to the penthouse, glowing softly behind the glass. Everything Dominic had once claimed now pulsed under her control. And she had done it without losing herself, without compromise, without regret. The city sprawled beneath her, alive, responsive, awaiting her command. Every heartbeat was hers. Every opportunity, every move, every power she had quietly amassed her own. She adjusted the umbrella once more, letting the rain fall freely around her, framing her as the queen of her destiny, the ruler of her empire. And as the storm continued to lash the city, she finally allowed herself the faintest smile. Not victory for vanity, but satisfaction for intellect, strategy, and patience realized. The empire, the city, and her life, all aligned beneath her command. Sienna Vance had emerged not just victorious, but untouchable.